In the dead of night, when even the palace mice dare not stir, a single command can shake the foundations of a kingdom. What happens when that command comes from someone who shouldn't exist, for someone who cannot be found, about something that never officially happened? Sometimes the most dangerous orders are the ones whispered in darkness, and the most terrifying moment for any guard is when they must choose between duty and truth. Captain Marcus Blackwood had served the Royal Guard for 15 years, and in all that time he had never questioned an order. Not when he was asked to escort disgraced nobles to the dungeons, not when he had to stand motionless for 12 hours while the king entertained foreign dignitaries, but the conversations he had overheard in the royal chambers. But tonight, as he stood in the dimly lit corridor outside the Queen's private study, Marcus found himself staring at a piece of parchment that made his blood run cold. The message had arrived just after midnight, delivered by a page boy who couldn't have been more than 14. The child's hands had trembled as he pressed the sealed letter into Marcus's palm, and his eyes had held a fear that seemed too old for his young face. Before Marcus could ask any questions, the boy had vanished back into the labyrinthine passages of the palace, leaving behind only the echo of his hurried footsteps and the lingering scent of fear-induced sweat. Marcus had broken the royal seal with practiced efficiency, expecting another routine security briefing or perhaps orders for an early morning ceremony. Instead, he found himself reading words that seemed to blur and shift before his eyes, as if the very parchment was trying to hide its contents from him. The message was brief, written in an elegant script that he recognized but couldn't quite place. Arrest Lady Catherine Montrose immediately. Bring her to the tower. Tell no one. This order comes from the highest authority, Lady Catherine Montrose. The name struck Marcus like a physical blow. She was the Queen's closest friend, her most trusted confidant, and arguably the most beloved woman in the kingdom after Her Majesty herself. Lady Catherine had been instrumental in negotiating the recent peace treaty with the neighboring kingdom of Aldermore. She had personally overseen the charitable foundations that fed thousands of the kingdom's poor. She had even saved the young Prince William from a runaway horse just 3 months ago, earning her a place of honor that few nobles could ever hope to achieve. Marcus read the message again, hoping he had somehow misunderstood, but the words remained unchanged, stark and unforgiving in the candlelight. The parchment felt heavy in his hands, as if it carried the weight of impending doom. He noticed that his palms had begun to sweat, leaving damp fingerprints on the edges of the paper. This was not just unusual, it was unprecedented. Never in the history of the Royal Guard had such an order been given regarding someone of Lady Catherine's standing. The corridor seemed to grow colder as Marcus stood there, his mind racing through the implications of what he held. The palace at night was always full of shadows and whispers, but tonight the darkness felt alive, pressing against him from all sides. The flickering torches cast dancing shadows on the stone walls, creating the illusion of movement where there should be none. Every creak of the old building, every distant footstep, every whisper of wind through the corridors seemed magnified, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Marcus had been trained to follow orders without question, but this command felt different. It felt wrong. Lady Catherine had dined with the royal family just that evening. He had seen her laughing with the Queen, discussing plans for the upcoming harvest festival. She had complimented young Prince William on his swordsmanship and had promised to attend his birthday celebration next week. Could someone who had shared wine and stories with the royal family just hours ago really be guilty of some terrible crime worthy of immediate arrest? The captain tried to remember everything he knew about Lady Catherine. Paris, she was a widow, having lost her husband Sir James Montrose to fever 3 years prior. She had no children of her own, but was godmother to at least a dozen noble offspring throughout the kingdom. British Rosewood Manor was known for its beautiful gardens and its open doors to travelers and those in need. She spoke 4 languages fluently and had once served as an unofficial ambassador to the court of France. Nothing in her background suggested treachery or treason, yet here was an order, bearing what appeared to be an official seal, commanding her immediate arrest. Marcus examined the seal more closely, holding it up to the torchlight. The wax was fresh, the impression clear and sharp. It bore the royal coat of arms, the lion and the rose intertwined beneath a crown. But something nagged at him about it. The color seemed slightly off, perhaps a shade too dark. The impression, while clear, seemed somehow less detailed than the royal seals he was accustomed to seeing. More troubling still was the phrase highest authority. In all his years of service, Marcus had received orders from the king, from the queen, from the prince regent, and from various high-ranking nobles. But never had an order come from such a vague source. 30. Royal commands were always specific about their origin. They bore signatures, official titles, and clear chains of command. This message was anonymous in a way that made Marcus's warrior instincts prickle with unease. The captain began to pace the corridor, his boots echoing softly on the stone floor. Each step seemed to emphasize the weight of the decision before him. If he carried out this order and Lady Catherine was indeed guilty of some terrible crime, he would be doing his duty in protecting the crown. But if this order was somehow false, if it was part of some conspiracy against an innocent woman, then following it would make him complicit in something far worse than dereliction of duty. Marcus thought about the other guards under his command. Should he involve them in this mysterious order? The message had specifically commanded him to tell no one, but how could he arrest a high-ranking noble without assistance? Lady Catherine might be a woman of middle years, but she was no helpless victim. She was intelligent, well-connected, and would certainly demand explanations that Marcus was not prepared to give. More importantly, any arrest of someone of her status would cause an immediate uproar throughout the palace. Servants would talk, other nobles would ask questions, and by morning the entire court would be buzzing with rumors and speculation. The weight of his responsibilities settled on Marcus's shoulders like a heavy cloak. He had always prided himself on being a soldier who followed orders, a man who served his sovereign without question or hesitation. But tonight, for the first time in his career, he found himself wondering if blind obedience might be the wrong choice. The very foundation of his service, his unquestioning loyalty to the crown, was being tested by a piece of parchment that raised more questions than it answered. As Marcus continued to pace, his mind turned to the various possibilities that could explain this strange order. Perhaps Lady Catherine had been discovered in some treasonous correspondence with foreign powers. Maybe she had been caught stealing from the royal treasury or plotting against the king's life. But even as he tried to imagine scenarios that would justify her arrest, none of them felt believable. Lady Catherine was many things, but a traitor was not one of them. Another possibility occurred to him, one that made his stomach clench with dread. What if this order was not legitimate? What if someone was using the confusion and darkness of night to eliminate a political rival or settle a personal score? The court was full of ambitious nobles who viewed Lady Catherine's influence with the queen as an obstacle to their own advancement. Could one of them have crafted this false order, hoping to remove her from the picture permanently? The thought of being used as a weapon in someone else's political game filled Marcus with anger. He had not devoted 15 years of his life to protecting the royal family, only to be manipulated into destroying an innocent woman. But how could he be certain of anything without more information? And how could he obtain that information without violating the explicit command to tell no one about the order? Marcus stopped pacing and leaned against the stone wall, feeling its coolness seep through his uniform. The corridor stretched out before him in both directions, disappearing into shadows that seemed to hold secrets of their own. Somewhere in this vast palace, Lady Catherine was presumably sleeping peacefully in her guest chambers, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Somewhere else, the person who had sent this order was waiting to see if their command would be carried out without question. The captain closed his eyes and tried to clear his mind, to find the clarity that had always guided him in moments of crisis. But instead of answers, he found only more questions. Who had really sent this order? Why was Lady Catherine being targeted? What would happen to him if he refused to carry out the command? What would happen to her if he did? And when Marcus opened his eyes again, the first hints of dawn were beginning to creep through the narrow windows that lined the corridor. Soon the palace would begin to stir with the activities of another day. Servants would begin their duties, nobles would rise for their morning routines, and the royal family would expect their usual briefings and protections. If he was going to act on this mysterious order, he would have to do so soon. But if he was going to refuse it, he needed to decide what his next steps would be. The parchment in his hand seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, as if it were alive and eager to see its deadly purpose fulfilled. Marcus knew that whatever decision he made in the next few minutes would define not only his own fate, but potentially the fate of an innocent woman, and the stability of the kingdom itself. The weight of that responsibility was almost overwhelming, but it was also clarifying. For the first time since receiving the order, Marcus began to understand what he had to do. As the pale light of dawn continued to filter into the corridor, Captain Marcus Blackwood straightened his shoulders and prepared to make the most important decision of his military career. The question was no longer whether he would follow the mysterious order, but how he would go about uncovering the truth behind it. Lady Catherine's life might depend on his next move, and Marcus was determined not to let her down. The night that had begun with a simple delivery of what appeared to be a routine order had transformed into something far more complex and dangerous. But Marcus had not become captain of the Royal Guard by avoiding difficult decisions. As he folded the parchment and tucked it into his uniform, he knew that the coming hours would test every skill he had learned and every instinct he had developed in his years of service to the crown. Marcus decided that he needed more information before taking any action, but getting that information would require breaking the order to tell no one. However, he reasoned that if the order itself was false, then violating it might actually be serving the crown's true interests. With this justification in mind, he made his way through the palace's winding corridors toward the chambers of Sir Edmund Hartley, the king's most trusted advisor and a man whose loyalty to the crown was beyond question about the course of his long career. Surviving court intrigue and political upheavals through a combination of wisdom, discretion, and an uncanny ability to distinguish truth from deception. If anyone could help Marcus understand the legitimacy of this mysterious order, it would be Sir Edmund. The old advisor was known for rising before dawn to study reports and prepare briefings, so Marcus hoped to find him already awake and available for consultation. The walk to Sir Edmund's chambers took Marcus through some of the oldest sections of the palace, where the stone walls bore the marks of centuries and the air seemed thick with the weight of history. These corridors had witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties, the signing of peace treaties, and the plotting of rebellions. As Marcus's footsteps echoed through the ancient halls, he couldn't help but wonder if he was walking toward his own place in that history, or perhaps toward the end of his career entirely. Sir Edmund's door was heavy oak, reinforced with iron bands and bearing the carved seal of his office. Marcus knocked softly, using the special pattern that identified him as a member of the Royal Guard. After a moment, he heard shuffling footsteps and the sound of multiple locks being undone. The door opened to reveal Sir Edmund's weathered face, his gray eyes sharp and alert despite the early hour. "Captain Blackwood," Sir Edmund said quietly, stepping aside to allow Marcus into the chamber. "This is an unusual time for a visit. What brings you to my door before the sun has fully risen?" Marcus entered the chamber and waited for Sir Edmund to secure the door behind him. The advisor's private study was a testament to a lifetime of service to the crown. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling, their leather bindings worn smooth by countless readings. Maps of the kingdom and neighboring territories covered a large table in the center of the room, marked with pins and notations in Sir Edmund's careful handwriting. A small fire crackled in the fireplace, providing warmth and light that made the room feel like a sanctuary from the cold stone corridors outside. "Sir Edmund," Marcus began, his voice carefully controlled, "I have received an order that troubles me greatly. Before I act upon it, I need to understand if it truly comes from the highest authority, as it claims." Sir Edmund's expression grew serious as he gestured for Marcus to sit in one of the comfortable chairs arranged near the fireplace. The old advisor poured 2 cups of tea from a pot that had been keeping warm on the hearth, handing one to Marcus before settling into his own chair. The ritual of sharing tea was Sir Edmund's way of creating a safe space for difficult conversations, and Marcus felt some of his tension ease as the warm liquid steadied his nerves. "Tell me about this order, Captain," Sir Edmund said, his voice gentle but commanding. "Leave out no details, no matter how small they might seem." Marcus recounted the entire sequence of events, from the nervous page boy's midnight delivery to his own growing doubts about the order's authenticity. He described the unusual wax seal, the vague reference to highest authority, and most importantly, the target of the alleged command. As he spoke, he watched Sir Edmund's face carefully, noting how the advisor's expression grew increasingly grave with each detail. When Marcus finished his account, Sir Edmund was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames of the fireplace as if they might hold answers to the questions that now troubled both men. Finally, the old advisor spoke, his voice heavy with concern. Captain, in all my years of service to this crown, I have never known Lady Catherine to be anything other than a loyal and honorable servant of the kingdom. More than that, she dined with their majesties just last evening, and there was no indication whatsoever of any suspicion or concern regarding her conduct. If she had committed some act worthy of immediate arrest, I would certainly have been informed. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension at Sir Edmund's words. His instincts about Lady Catherine's innocence appeared to be correct, but this confirmation also meant that the order he carried was almost certainly false. The implications of that realization were staggering. Furthermore, Sir Edmund continued, no order for the arrest of anyone at Lady Catherine's level would be issued without my knowledge. Such a command would require extensive documentation, legal justification, and coordination with multiple departments within the palace administration. The fact that you received this order in such an irregular manner, with no supporting paperwork or official channels, strongly suggests that it is not legitimate. Marcus pulled the parchment from his uniform and handed it to Sir Edmund for examination. The advisor moved closer to the firelight, studying the message and its seal with the practiced eye of someone who had spent decades dealing with official documents. After several minutes of careful inspection, Sir Edmund's frown deepened. The seal is expertly crafted, he said finally, but it is not genuine. The wax is of good quality, but it lacks the specific additives that make royal seals unique. More importantly, the impression itself, while accurate in general appearance, contains subtle differences that would only be noticeable to someone intimately familiar with the authentic seal. This is the work of someone with considerable skill and resources, but it is definitely a forgery. The confirmation that the order was false should have brought Marcus relief, but instead it filled him with a new kind of dread. Someone had gone to enormous trouble and expense to create this convincing forgery. They had infiltrated the palace's internal communication system, gained access to someone who could serve as a messenger, and crafted a seal that could fool most people who saw it. This was not the work of an amateur or someone acting on impulse. This was a carefully planned conspiracy. Sir Edmund, Marcus said slowly, if this order is false, then someone is trying to use me to eliminate Lady Catherine. But why would anyone want to harm her, and why use such an elaborate deception? Sir Edmund set the forged document aside and turned his attention fully to Marcus. And the firelight cast deep shadows across his weathered face, making him look older and more troubled than Marcus had ever seen him. Lady Catherine possesses something that many people in this court desire: the complete trust and affection of their majesties. She has influence that extends far beyond her official position, and she has used that influence to advance causes that do not always align with the interests of certain powerful individuals. It is possible that someone views her as an obstacle to their own ambitions. Marcus considered this possibility. The royal court was notorious for its political intrigue, but most conspiracies involved relatively subtle machinations, spreading rumors, forming alliances, or maneuvering for advantageous appointments. The forged arrest order represented a dramatic escalation in the stakes of court politics. He said, "There is another possibility," Sir Edmund continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Lady Catherine recently returned from a diplomatic mission to the court of Aldermore. She was negotiating the final details of the trade agreement that will bring considerable wealth to our kingdom. It is possible that someone who opposes that agreement, either from within our own court or as an agent of foreign interests, is trying to eliminate her before she can complete her work. Was even more troubling than personal or political motivations. If foreign agents had infiltrated the palace deeply enough to forge royal orders and corrupt palace messengers, then the security of the entire kingdom could be at risk. Marcus felt the weight of his responsibility growing heavier with each passing moment. "What should I do?" Marcus asked. "Entirely, whoever sent it will know that their plan has failed. They might try again with someone else, or they might escalate to more direct methods. But if I appear to carry out the order, I might be able to learn more about who is behind this conspiracy." Sir Edmund nodded approvingly at Marcus's reasoning. "You are thinking like a true protector of the crown, Captain. But any plan we devise must ensure Lady Catherine's absolute safety while also giving us the best chance of identifying and stopping the conspirators." The two men spent the next hour developing a strategy that would appear to comply with the forged order, while actually protecting Lady Catherine and gathering intelligence about the conspiracy. They would stage a convincing arrest, but instead of taking her to the tower as commanded, they would bring her to a secure location within the palace where she could be kept safe while they investigated the source of the false order. The plan required careful coordination and absolute discretion. Marcus would select only his most trusted guards to assist with the staged arrest, men whose loyalty to the crown was beyond question and who had the discipline to maintain the deception. Sir Edmund would use his network of contacts within the palace to monitor reactions to Lady Catherine's apparent arrest, watching for anyone who showed suspicious satisfaction or relief at the news. As they finalized the details of their plan, Marcus felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. The next few hours would be crucial not only for Lady Catherine's safety, but for the security of the kingdom itself. They were walking into dangerous territory where a single mistake could have catastrophic consequences. "Captain," Sir Edmund said as they prepared to put their plan into motion, "you are taking enormous risks to protect an innocent woman and serve the true interests of the crown. History may never know of your actions this night, but I want you to know that you are upholding the highest traditions of the Royal Guard." Marcus stood and adjusted his uniform, preparing to return to the corridors where he would begin implementing their deception. The weight of responsibility still pressed upon his shoulders, but it was now balanced by a clear sense of purpose. A Kiadiker. He might not know who was behind the conspiracy against Lady Catherine, but he was no longer facing the crisis alone. As he prepared to leave Sir Edmund's chambers, Marcus thought about Lady Catherine, still sleeping peacefully in her guest quarters, unaware of the forces arrayed against her. Soon he would have to wake her with news that would shatter her peaceful morning and thrust her into the center of a deadly game. But at least now he could offer her protection and hope, along with the disturbing revelations. The corridor outside Sir Edmund's chambers was still dim in the early morning light, but Marcus no longer felt oppressed by the shadows. He had a plan, an ally, and most importantly, a clear understanding of what needed to be done. The forged order in his pocket was still dangerous, but it was no longer a source of paralyzing uncertainty. It had become evidence in an investigation that he was determined to see through to its conclusion. As Marcus made his way through the palace toward Lady Catherine's quarters, he reflected on how much his situation had changed in just a few hours. The night had begun with what appeared to be a simple, if troubling, order from a superior. It was now revealed as part of a sophisticated conspiracy that threatened not only an innocent woman, but potentially the stability of the kingdom itself. The transformation had been jarring, but Marcus felt ready for the challenges that lay ahead. Marcus approached Lady Catherine's quarters with careful steps, his mind focused on the delicate task ahead. The guest wing of the palace was known for its elegant accommodations and discretion, housing visiting dignitaries and favored members of the court in comfortable chambers that reflected the kingdom's hospitality. Lady Catherine had been given one of the finest rooms in this section, a testament to her standing with the royal family and her importance as a diplomatic representative. The corridor leading to her chambers was lined with tall windows that faced the palace gardens, and as Marcus walked past them, he could see the first rays of sunlight beginning to illuminate the carefully maintained landscapes below. The gardens were Lady Catherine's particular passion. She had worked closely with the royal gardeners to introduce new varieties of roses and herbs that now graced the palace grounds with their beauty and fragrance. The irony was not lost on Marcus that he was about to disrupt the peace of someone who had contributed so much to the serenity of this place. Standing before Lady Catherine's door, Marcus took a deep breath and composed himself for the performance he was about to give. The success of their plan depended on making the arrest appear genuine to any observers while communicating the truth to Lady Catherine in a way that would secure her cooperation. It was a delicate balance that would require all of his diplomatic skills as well as his military training. Marcus knocked firmly on the door, using the formal pattern that identified him as an official representative of the royal guard. After several moments, he heard movement within the chamber and the soft sound of slippers approaching the door. Lady Catherine's voice came through the heavy wood, still thick with sleep but alert enough to recognize the unusual hour of the visit. "Who is there at this early hour?" she called softly. "Print, Captain Marcus Blackwood of the Royal Guard, my lady," Marcus replied, keeping his voice formal but not hostile. "I need to speak with you on a matter of urgent importance." The door opened after a moment, revealing Lady Catherine wrapped in an elegant silk robe, her graying hair pinned back in a simple style that somehow managed to make her look both dignified and approachable. Her intelligent gray eyes showed concern but no fear, and Marcus was struck again by the composed grace that had made her such an effective diplomat and beloved figure at court. "Captain Blackwood," she said with a slight smile, "this is certainly an unusual time for a social call. Please, come in and tell me what matter could be so urgent as to wake a lady before dawn." Marcus entered the chamber, noting the comfortable furnishings and personal touches that Lady Catherine had added during her extended stay at the palace. Books in several languages were stacked on a writing desk near the window, and fresh flowers from the garden graced a small table, filling the room with a subtle fragrance that reminded Marcus of the peaceful mornings he had spent patrolling those same gardens. "My lady," Marcus began, his voice carefully modulated to convey both respect and seriousness, "I have received an order that concerns your immediate safety. Before I explain the details, I need you to understand that things are not as they appear, and your cooperation is essential for your own protection." Lady Catherine's expression sharpened with interest and concern. She had spent enough time in royal courts and diplomatic circles to recognize when someone was trying to communicate important information in a coded manner. She moved to a chair near the fireplace and gestured for Marcus to sit across from her, creating an intimate setting for what promised to be a difficult conversation. "I am listening, Captain," she said quietly. "Please, speak freely." Marcus pulled the forged order from his uniform and handed it to Lady Catherine, watching her face carefully as she read the contents. He saw her eyebrows rise in surprise and confusion, followed by a flash of what might have been fear before her diplomatic training reasserted itself and her expression became carefully neutral. "This is quite extraordinary," she said finally, her voice steady despite the shocking nature of the document. "I assume you have questions about the legitimacy of this order?" "Indeed I do, my lady. I have consulted with Sir Edmund Hartley, and we have determined that this order is a forgery. Someone is attempting to use the Royal Guard to eliminate you, presumably because of your influence at court or your recent diplomatic activities. We believe you are in serious danger." Lady Catherine set the document aside and studied Marcus's face for several moments, as if trying to read the truth in his expression. Finally, she nodded slowly, her diplomatic instincts telling her that this young captain was being honest with her despite the extraordinary nature of his claims. "I appreciate your diligence in investigating this matter rather than simply following what appeared to be a legitimate order," she said. "Many men in your position would have acted first and asked questions later. Your restraint may well have saved my life." Marcus felt a wave of relief at her calm acceptance of the situation. He had been worried that Lady Catherine might panic or refuse to believe his explanation, but her years of experience in navigating dangerous political waters had prepared her well for this moment. "What do you propose we do?" she asked pragmatically. "I assume you have developed some sort of plan to protect me while identifying whoever is behind this conspiracy." Marcus outlined the strategy he had developed with Sir Edmund, explaining how they would stage a convincing arrest that would satisfy whoever was watching while actually moving Lady Catherine to a secure location within the palace. She listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions or suggesting modifications that would make the deception more believable. "There is one thing I should tell you," Lady Catherine said when Marcus had finished explaining their plan. "During my recent mission to Aldermore, I became aware of certain information that could be extremely damaging to some individuals at our own court. I had planned to share this information with their majesties privately, but it is possible that word of my discovery has somehow leaked." Marcus leaned forward, sensing that Lady Catherine was about to provide crucial information that could help them identify the source of the threat against her. Firelight flickered across her face as she chose her words carefully, clearly weighing how much she should reveal. "Without going into specific details," she continued, "I learned that someone within our court has been providing sensitive information to agents of foreign powers. This person has been very careful to cover their tracks, but certain financial transactions and communication patterns suggest a level of treachery that goes far beyond normal court intrigue." The implications of Lady Catherine's revelation struck Marcus immediately. If she had uncovered evidence of a foreign spy operating at the highest levels of the kingdom's government, then her assassination would serve multiple purposes, eliminating a threat to the spy's continued activities and sending a clear message to anyone else who might be investigating similar activities. "My lady, do you have any suspicions about who this traitor might be?" Marcus asked. Lady Catherine shook her head slowly. The evidence I gathered points to someone with access to high-level diplomatic and military information. Someone who has been in a position of trust for several years. But the identity of this person remains hidden behind layers of intermediaries and false identities. I had hoped to work with Sir Edmund and the king's other advisors to unravel the mystery safely. Marcus realized that their situation was even more dangerous than he had initially understood. They were not simply dealing with court intrigue or personal vendetta. They were confronting a sophisticated espionage operation that had already demonstrated its reach into the palace's most secure communication systems. Prize. We need to modify our plan, Marcus said. If foreign agents are involved, they may have additional resources at their disposal. We cannot assume that staging your arrest will satisfy them for long. They may have backup plans or alternative methods of eliminating you. Lady Catherine nodded in agreement. I suggest we also consider the possibility that the young page who delivered the forged order to you was not acting voluntarily. Children are often used as unwitting tools in these operations because they are less likely to be suspected and more easily manipulated. This possibility had not occurred to Marcus, but it made perfect sense. The page boy's obvious fear and nervousness could have been the result of threats or coercion rather than simple anxiety about delivering an unusual message. If the boy was indeed a victim rather than a willing participant, it meant that the conspiracy was even more ruthless than they had imagined. We should also consider, Lady Catherine added thoughtfully, that whoever is behind this may be watching for my reaction to the arrest order. If I simply disappear into palace security, they may become suspicious and accelerate their timeline for more direct action. Marcus appreciated Lady Catherine's strategic thinking. Her diplomatic training had taught her to consider multiple layers of deception and counter-deception, skills that were proving invaluable in their current situation. Together, they refined their plan to account for these additional complications. They decided that Lady Catherine would indeed appear to be arrested and taken away, but instead of hiding her in a secure location, they would arrange for her to be visibly placed in what appeared to be official custody while actually being protected by Marcus's most trusted guards. This would satisfy any observers that the arrest order had been carried out while giving them opportunities to observe who showed satisfaction or relief at her apparent detention. Meanwhile, Sir Edmund would begin a discreet investigation into the financial and communication records that might reveal the identity of the foreign agent Lady Catherine had been tracking. They would coordinate their efforts to create a comprehensive picture of the conspiracy while ensuring that Lady Catherine remained safe throughout the process. As they finalized the details of their revised plan, Marcus found himself impressed by Lady Catherine's courage and composure. Despite learning that her life was in immediate danger from sophisticated foreign agents, she remained calm and focused on finding solutions rather than giving in to fear. Her diplomatic training had clearly prepared her for situations that went far beyond normal court protocol. "Captain," Lady Catherine said as they prepared to implement their deception, "I want you to know that I understand the risks you are taking by protecting me rather than blindly following orders. Whatever happens in the coming hours, I am grateful for your integrity and courage." There, Marcus stood and adjusted his uniform, preparing to return to his official duties. The next phase of their plan would require careful timing and flawless execution. Any mistake could expose their deception and put Lady Catherine in even greater danger. "My lady," Marcus replied, "protecting innocent people and serving the true interests of the crown is why I became a royal guard. If I cannot do that when it matters most, then all my years of service would be meaningless." As Marcus prepared to leave Lady Catherine's chambers to arrange for the staged arrest, both of them understood that they were embarking on a dangerous gamble. Success would protect an innocent woman and potentially expose a serious threat to the kingdom's security. Failure could result in Lady Catherine's death and the continuation of foreign espionage activities that could ultimately threaten the stability of the realm itself. The morning sun was now streaming through the windows of Lady Catherine's chambers, casting long shadows across the elegant furnishings and creating an atmosphere that was both beautiful and ominous. Even this peaceful room would be disturbed by the sounds of an arrest. But Marcus and Lady Catherine were determined that it would be an arrest that served justice rather than treachery. Marcus left Lady Catherine's chambers with a renewed sense of purpose and began implementing the most critical phase of their plan. The task was to select the guards who would assist in the staged arrest, men whose loyalty and discretion were beyond question. He needed soldiers who could perform convincingly for any observers while understanding the true nature of their mission. Sergeant William Hayes was Marcus's first choice. Hayes had served under Marcus for 7 years and had proven himself in both combat situations and delicate court assignments. He was known for his quick thinking and ability to adapt to unexpected circumstances, qualities that would be essential in the coming hours. Marcus found Hayes in the guard quarters, reviewing the day's duty assignments with his characteristic attention to detail. "Sergeant Hayes," Marcus said quietly, approaching him with the bearing of a man about to discuss confidential matters. "I need to speak with you privately about a special assignment." Hayes immediately set aside his paperwork and followed Marcus to a small alcove, where they could speak without being overheard. The early morning light filtering through the narrow windows cast long shadows that seemed to emphasize the serious nature of their conversation. Marcus explained the situation in careful terms, revealing enough information for Hayes to understand the gravity of their task without compromising operational security. He watched Hayes's expression change from curiosity to concern to grim determination as the full implications became clear. Sir," Hayes said when Marcus had finished, "this is the most important assignment any of us will ever receive. You can count on my complete loyalty and discretion." Next, Marcus approached Corporal James Mitchell, a younger soldier who had distinguished himself during a recent incident involving foreign diplomats. Mitchell had shown both courage and diplomatic sensitivity when diffusing a potentially explosive situation between visiting ambassadors, demonstrating the kind of balanced judgment that would be crucial for their current mission. Mitchell's reaction to the briefing was similar to Hayes's, moving quickly from surprise to understanding to resolute commitment. "Captain," he said firmly, "Lady Catherine has always shown kindness to the guards and respect for our service. If someone is trying to harm her through deception, then protecting her is exactly what we should be doing." With his team assembled, Marcus began coordinating the details of the staged arrest. They would need to make the scene convincing enough to satisfy any hidden observers, while ensuring Lady Catherine's comfort and safety throughout the process. The performance would need to be flawless, as even small inconsistencies could expose their deception and put everyone involved at risk. Meanwhile, Sir Edmund had begun his own investigation into the palace's communication systems and recent visitor logs. His decades of experience in court administration gave him access to records and information that would be invisible to most other people. That he was particularly interested in identifying anyone who had been in a position to observe Lady Catherine's recent activities or overhear her conversations about her diplomatic discoveries. Sir Edmund's first breakthrough came when he discovered irregularities in the palace's messenger service records. The page boy who had delivered the forged order to Marcus was listed as being off-duty that night, yet he had clearly been inside the palace and performing what appeared to be official functions. This discrepancy suggested that someone had either coerced the boy into service or had arranged for him to be present through unofficial channels. Further investigation revealed that the boy, Thomas Whitmore, came from a family that had fallen on hard financial times following his father's death in military service. The family's precarious economic situation would have made them vulnerable to offers of money in exchange for seemingly harmless favors, such as delivering messages within the palace. Sir Edmund made arrangements to speak with the boy privately, hoping to learn more about who had recruited him and what instructions he had been given. As Sir Edmund delved deeper into the palace records, he discovered another disturbing pattern. Several staff members who had access to sensitive areas of the palace had received unexpected payments or gifts in recent weeks. While such rewards were not uncommon in a generous court, the timing and recipients suggested a coordinated effort to build a network of people who might be willing to provide information or perform small services without asking too many questions. The scope of the conspiracy was becoming clearer, and it was larger than anyone had initially suspected. Someone had been methodically placing assets throughout the palace infrastructure, creating a network that could gather intelligence, deliver messages, and potentially carry out more serious operations. Lady Catherine's discovery of foreign espionage activities had apparently threatened this entire network, making her elimination a priority for whoever was running the operation. Back in the main palace, Marcus was putting the finishing touches on the arrest scenario. He had arranged for Lady Catherine to be taken to what appeared to be a holding cell in the palace's administrative wing, but which was actually a secure office that had been modified to provide both safety and comfort. The room had multiple exit routes and was positioned where Marcus's guards could maintain constant but discreet surveillance. The staged arrest itself was scheduled to take place during the morning meal period, when many palace residents would be in the dining halls and unlikely to witness the event directly. However, word of Lady Catherine's detention would spread quickly through the servant networks, ensuring that anyone with interest in her fate would learn of it within hours. As the appointed time approached, Marcus felt the familiar tension that preceded any dangerous operation. Pestery taught him to channel this nervous energy into heightened awareness and preparation, but the personal stakes involved in this mission made the pressure more intense than anything he had experienced in conventional combat situations. Lady Catherine had spent the intervening hours preparing for her ordeal with the same methodical approach she brought to diplomatic negotiations. She had arranged her personal affairs, written several letters to be delivered in case of emergency, and even selected clothing that would be both dignified and practical for whatever lay ahead. Her calm preparation impressed Marcus and reinforced his determination to protect her. At precisely 9 o'clock in the morning, Marcus and his selected guards arrived at Lady Catherine's chambers to begin the staged arrest. They had rehearsed their roles carefully, with each man understanding exactly how to project authority and efficiency while ensuring Lady Catherine's complete safety and comfort. Lady Catherine Montrose, Marcus announced in a voice that carried throughout the corridor. By order of the highest authority, you are under arrest and will be taken into custody immediately. Lady Catherine played her part perfectly, showing appropriate surprise and concern without overacting. Her diplomatic training served her well as she projected the dignity of an innocent person facing false accusations rather than the fear of someone who knew her life was in danger. Captain Blackwood, she replied in a voice that was clearly audible to anyone who might be listening. I must protest this treatment. I demand to know the nature of the charges against me and to speak with someone in authority about this matter. You will have the opportunity to address these concerns once you have been properly detained, Marcus responded formally. Please gather only essential personal items and come with us immediately. The performance continued as they made their way through the palace corridors, with Lady Catherine maintaining her pose of dignified protest, while Marcus and his guards projected professional efficiency. Several servants and minor nobles observed the procession, their shocked expressions and whispered conversations confirming that news of the arrest would soon spread throughout the palace. As they reached the administrative wing where Lady Catherine would be held in protective custody, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The first phase of their plan had been executed successfully, but the real test would come in the hours ahead as they waited to see who would react to news of Lady Catherine's detention. Sir Edmund, watching from a discreet vantage point, had already begun observing the reactions of various court members to the dramatic events. He was particularly interested in identifying anyone who seemed either unusually pleased by Lady Catherine's arrest or suspiciously unsurprised by the turn of events. Within the first hour after the arrest, Sir Edmund noticed several interesting reactions. Lord Pemberton, a minor noble who had opposed the trade agreement with Aldermore, seemed remarkably cheerful for someone who had just witnessed the detention of a respected court member. Lady Thornbury, who had long been jealous of Lady Catherine's influence with the Queen, was observed expressing satisfaction to several other nobles about what she called overdue justice. But the most significant reaction came from an unexpected source. Master Robert Aldrich, the palace's chief administrative clerk, appeared to be extremely agitated by news of the arrest. Rather than showing the surprise or concern that would be natural for someone learning of such dramatic events, Aldrich seemed to be upset that something had gone wrong with a plan he had expected to unfold differently. Sir Edmund made careful note of Aldrich's behavior and began examining the clerk's recent activities more closely. Aldrich had access to virtually every aspect of palace administration, including communication systems, visitor records, and staff assignments. He would have been in an ideal position to coordinate the various elements of the conspiracy against Lady Catherine. Further investigation revealed that Aldrich had been experiencing financial difficulties related to gambling debts and expensive personal habits. These pressures would have made him vulnerable to recruitment by foreign agents seeking to place assets within the palace administration. DOX. His position would have given him access to the materials and knowledge necessary to create convincing forged documents and coordinate complex operations. Process. Marcus maintained careful surveillance of Lady Catherine's secure location, while Sir Edmund continued building evidence against Aldrich and potentially other conspirators. The success of their plan depended on gathering enough information to identify all participants in the conspiracy before anyone realized that Lady Catherine was not actually in danger. The afternoon brought additional revelations as Sir Edmund's investigation expanded to include Aldrich's recent correspondence and financial transactions. But the evidence strongly suggested that Aldrich had been recruited by foreign agents several months earlier and had been systematically gathering intelligence and preparing assets for more ambitious operations. Big Network, during her diplomatic mission to Aldermore, had apparently accelerated the conspirators' timeline, forcing them to attempt her elimination before she could share her findings with the royal administration. The forged arrest order represented a desperate gambit by people who were running out of time and options. As evening approached, Marcus and Sir Edmund prepared for the final phase of their operation. They had identified the likely source of the conspiracy and gathered substantial evidence of foreign espionage activities. Now they needed to coordinate with the king's security forces to arrest the real criminals while ensuring Lady Catherine's continued safety. The events that had begun with a mysterious midnight order were approaching their conclusion, but Marcus knew that the most dangerous moments often came just before a mission's successful completion. The conspirators might still have resources they had not yet revealed, and cornered enemies were often the most unpredictable and desperate. As night fell over the palace, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since he first received the forged order. What had seemed like a simple if troubling command had revealed a sophisticated conspiracy that threatened the security of the entire kingdom. His decision to question rather than blindly obey had not only saved Lady Catherine's life, but had also exposed a dangerous espionage operation that might have continued undetected for years. The final confrontation came sooner than Marcus or Sir Edmund had anticipated. As they prepared to present their evidence to the king and coordinate the arrest of Master Robert Aldrich and his conspirators, urgent word reached them that Aldrich had been seen leaving the palace grounds in obvious haste. The administrative clerk had apparently realized that his network was compromised and was attempting to flee before he could be apprehended. Marcus immediately understood the implications of Aldrich's flight. If the man escaped, he could warn his foreign contacts and potentially expose other agents who remained undetected throughout the kingdom. More immediately, his desperate situation might drive him to make one final attempt to eliminate Lady Catherine before disappearing permanently. The staged arrest that had seemed so successful might have actually accelerated the danger rather than reducing it. "Sir Edmund," Marcus said urgently, "we need to inform His Majesty immediately and coordinate with all available security forces. If Aldrich is fleeing, he may have additional resources we haven't discovered, including agents positioned outside the palace who could attempt to reach Lady Catherine." Sir Edmund nodded grimly and dispatched immediate messages to the king's private chambers, while Marcus moved to reinforce the security around Lady Catherine's location. The comfortable administrative office that had served as her protective custody facility was suddenly transformed into a potential fortress, with Marcus's most trusted guards taking positions at every possible approach route. Lady Catherine, informed of the latest developments, received the news with the same composed grace she had shown throughout the ordeal. Her diplomatic experience had taught her that dangerous situations often became most perilous just as they seemed to be resolving, and she was prepared for whatever challenges the next few hours might bring. "Captain Blackwood," she said calmly, "I have been thinking about the information I gathered in Aldermore, and there may be details that could help us understand what resources Aldrich and his associates might still have available. Perhaps we should review what I learned while we wait for His Majesty's response." Marcus was struck again by Lady Catherine's ability to remain focused on productive action even under extreme stress. While he arranged the defensive positions around her location, she began recounting the specific intelligence she had gathered about foreign espionage activities, providing details that could help them anticipate what threats might still emerge. According to Lady Catherine's information, the espionage network she had discovered was more sophisticated than a simple intelligence-gathering operation. The foreign agents had been working to influence policy decisions, disrupt trade negotiations, and potentially prepare the way for more direct political interference. Aldrich's role as chief administrative clerk had made him an invaluable asset, giving the conspirators access to official communications and advance notice of important government decisions. "There was also evidence," Lady Catherine continued, "suggesting that the network included individuals beyond our own court." "That doubt. I believe they have agents or sympathizers in several neighboring kingdoms, creating a web of influence that could be used to coordinate destabilizing activities across multiple nations. This revelation helped explain why Lady Catherine's elimination had been such a priority for the conspirators. Her diplomatic mission had not just uncovered local espionage activities, it had revealed an international conspiracy that could threaten the stability of the entire region. Her knowledge made her one of the most dangerous people alive from the perspective of the foreign agents who had worked so hard to build their network. As Marcus absorbed this information, a commotion in the corridor outside drew his attention. Sergeant Hayes appeared at the door with an urgent expression that immediately put Marcus on high alert. "Captain," Hayes said quietly, "we have a situation developing in the courtyard. Master Aldrich has returned to the palace with several armed men who are demanding Lady Catherine's immediate release into their custody. They claim to have authorization from foreign diplomatic sources." Marcus felt his blood run cold. Aldrich's return with armed supporters represented exactly the kind of escalation they had feared. The administrative clerk had apparently decided that his only chance of survival lay in completing his original mission, even if it meant exposing himself and his associates through direct action. "How many men?" Marcus asked, his mind already calculating defensive strategies and escape routes. "At least 6, possibly more still arriving," Hayes replied. "They're well armed and appear to have military training. Sir Edmund is attempting to stall them with discussions about proper diplomatic procedures, but I don't think that will work for long." Lady Catherine stood and moved closer to Marcus, her expression serious but determined. "Captain, I will not allow innocent people to be harmed because of the danger I represent. If surrendering myself would prevent bloodshed, then perhaps that is what we should consider." "Absolutely not," Marcus replied firmly. "These people have already demonstrated that they are willing to use forged orders and deception to achieve their goals. Surrendering to them would not prevent violence. It would simply ensure that their conspiracy succeeds." Instead, Marcus began implementing emergency protocols that he had hoped would not be necessary. He dispatched runners to alert the palace's full security contingent and arranged for Lady Catherine to be moved to an even more secure location, deeper within the palace's fortified sections. The administrative wing that had seemed adequately protected was now potentially compromised by Aldrich's knowledge of its layout and security arrangements. As they prepared to move Lady Catherine, word arrived that His Majesty had been informed of the situation and was personally directing the palace's response to the crisis. The king's involvement brought additional resources and authority to their efforts, but it also raised the stakes considerably. The foreign conspiracy had now directly challenged the crown's authority within its own palace, an act that could be considered tantamount to invasion. The movement to Lady Catherine's new secure location required careful coordination through corridors that might already be compromised. Marcus arranged for multiple diversionary groups to move through the palace simultaneously, making it difficult for any observers to determine which route Lady Catherine was actually taking. The deception was similar to techniques used in military operations to protect important commanders during battlefield evacuations. As they made their way through the palace's ancient corridors, Marcus reflected on how completely the situation had transformed since he first received the mysterious Midnight Order. What had begun as a question about the legitimacy of a single command had evolved into a full-scale security operation involving foreign espionage, diplomatic immunity claims, and armed confrontation within the palace walls. The palace's oldest section, where thick stone walls and narrow passages provided natural defensive advantages, the room itself had been used for important meetings during times of crisis throughout the kingdom's history, and it seemed fitting that Lady Catherine would find protection in a place where so many crucial decisions had been made over the centuries. As they secured Lady Catherine in her new location, urgent messages arrived from Sir Edmund reporting on the confrontation in the courtyard. Aldrich and his associates were becoming increasingly aggressive in their demands, threatening diplomatic consequences if Lady Catherine was not immediately released to their custody. However, their claims of diplomatic authority were proving to be as false as the original arrest order, with no legitimate foreign government acknowledging any connection to their activities. His Majesty's response was swift and decisive. Rather than engaging in further negotiations with people who had already proven their willingness to use deception and violence, the king ordered the immediate arrest of Aldrich and all his associates. Palace security forces reinforced by elements of the royal guard, moved to surround the armed intruders and demand their surrender. The confrontation that followed was brief but intense. Aldrich and several of his associates attempted to fight their way out of the palace, apparently believing they could escape and regroup for another attempt. However, they had seriously underestimated the skill and determination of the royal security forces. Within minutes, the entire group was either captured or neutralized, with minimal casualties among the palace defenders. Marcus remained with Lady Catherine throughout the final confrontation, but reports reached them quickly as the situation was resolved. Aldrich himself was captured alive, along with documents and communications that would provide extensive intelligence about the foreign espionage network he had been serving. The evidence would not only protect Lady Catherine, but would also help identify and eliminate other agents who might be operating in neighboring kingdoms. As dawn broke over the palace for the second time since Marcus had received the mysterious order, the immediate crisis was finally over. Lady Catherine was safe. The conspiracy against her had been exposed and defeated, and a significant foreign espionage operation had been dismantled. The kingdom was more secure than it had been in months, thanks to one guard captain's decision to question orders rather than blindly following them. In the days that followed, the full scope of the conspiracy became clear through interrogations and document analysis. Aldrich had indeed been recruited by foreign agents months earlier, and his position had allowed him to coordinate an extensive intelligence-gathering operation. Lady Catherine's diplomatic discoveries in Aldermore had threatened to expose not just the local network, but connections to similar operations in several other kingdoms. Lady Catherine returned to her normal activities within the palace, though with enhanced security arrangements that reflected her importance as a witness to international espionage activities. Her diplomatic work would continue, but now with the knowledge that her efforts to strengthen the kingdom through trade agreements and international cooperation were considered serious enough threats by foreign powers to warrant elaborate assassination attempts, Marcus was commended by His Majesty for his handling of the crisis and was given additional responsibilities for protecting sensitive diplomatic activities. The experience had taught him valuable lessons about the complexity of modern threats to the kingdom and the importance of thinking critically about orders and situations that seemed unusual or suspicious. Sir Edmund continued his own investigations into the intelligence gathered from Aldrich's network, working to identify other potential security threats and strengthen the palace's defenses against future espionage attempts. The elderly advisor had been instrumental in developing the strategy that ultimately defeated the conspiracy, and his expertise would be crucial for preventing similar operations in the future. The young page boy, Thomas Whitmore, was found to have been coerced into delivering the forged order through threats against his family. Rather than being punished, he was provided with additional support and security, and his family's financial difficulties were addressed through royal assistance. The boy's unwilling participation in the conspiracy had taught palace security valuable lessons about protecting vulnerable staff members from manipulation by hostile agents. As Marcus reflected on the events that had transformed his understanding of his duties as a royal guard, he realized that the most important lesson was the necessity of balancing obedience with judgment. Blind adherence to orders, no matter how official they appeared, could be manipulated by clever enemies. True service to the crown required the wisdom to distinguish between legitimate commands and sophisticated deceptions. The forged order that had started everything was preserved as evidence and as a reminder of how close the conspiracy had come to succeeding. If Marcus had simply followed the apparently legitimate command without question, Lady Catherine would have disappeared into custody from which she might never have emerged. The kingdom would have lost not only a valuable diplomatic asset, but also the crucial intelligence that ultimately exposed a significant foreign espionage operation. The events also demonstrated the importance of building relationships and trust within the palace community. Marcus's decision to consult with Sir Edmund rather than acting alone had been crucial to developing an effective response to the crisis. Lady Catherine's composure and cooperation had enabled them to implement complex deceptions that ultimately protected her while gathering intelligence about her attackers. In the years that followed, the story of the Midnight Order became legendary within the Royal Guard, serving as a training example for new recruits about the importance of critical thinking and moral courage. Marcus often told the story to younger guards, emphasizing that their ultimate loyalty was not to any particular order or individual, but to the principles and people that the crown represented. The conspiracy against Lady Catherine had been defeated not through violence or dramatic heroics, but through careful thought, collaborative planning, and the courage to question authority when that authority seemed to be compromised. These were lessons that would serve the royal guard well in facing future challenges to the kingdom's security and stability. As Marcus continued his service to the crown in the years that followed, he never forgot the night when a simple question about a mysterious order had uncovered a sophisticated conspiracy and ultimately saved both an innocent woman and the security of the realm itself. The experience had transformed him from a soldier who followed orders into a guardian who understood that true protection sometimes required the wisdom to know when not to obey.